Here's something most people aren't going to realize until it's already happened to them. The grocery items you are going to need most over the next 6 months are sitting on store shelves right now at prices that are about to become a memory. I need you to stockpile grocery items before June 1st. And I don't say that to alarm you. I say it because I've spent the last several months tracking commodity prices, supply chain data, and retail pricing trends, and what I'm seeing is a convergence of pressures. Green coffee bean prices have roughly doubled since 2023. Butter is sitting well above its 5-year average. Rice prices spiked and then didn't come back down. And that's before we get into something almost no other channel is covering, the tariff environment of 2025 and 2026, which has added a second layer of price pressure on top of every supply chain problem. Today I'm going to walk you through 15 specific grocery items you should be buying right now before June 1st. Not 10, 15. And I'm going to give you the exact reason prices are rising on each one, the specific numbers, and the storage tips that make this actually actionable. Number 11 on this list is something you buy every single week. And it's facing a double hit, weather disruption on its primary supply and tariff pressure from its biggest exporting country, that is going to push prices up by an estimated 20 to 30% before the end of the year. We'll get to it. If you're new here, hit subscribe right now. I do this research every week so you don't have to. I track commodity markets, retail pricing apps, and supply chain news, and I translate it into plain English so regular shoppers can make smart decisions. Not panic decisions. Smart ones. Let's get into it. Item number 1. Canned tomatoes. This one might feel too obvious to lead with. That's exactly why it matters. Canned tomatoes are infrastructure. They're not a meal, they're the base of dozens of meals. Soups, sauces, stews, shakshuka, chili, braised meats, pasta. If you cook at home with any regularity, you go through these constantly. And right now, the price trajectory on canned tomatoes is moving in one direction. California's Central Valley produces somewhere in the range of 90 to 95% of all processed tomatoes sold in American supermarkets. And the 2025 growing season hit real headwinds, heat stress during fruit set, and ongoing water allocation constraints in the San Joaquin Valley. Those aren't minor complications. They directly affect yield per acre, and yield affects the volume of product moving through the processing pipeline. Now here's what most people don't understand about how this works. A bad tomato harvest doesn't show up at the grocery store instantly. There's a pipeline delay of 6 to 12 months between when a crop underperforms and when you feel it at the shelf. The price increases that are coming this summer are already baked in. They're not predictions. They're the downstream result of what happened on California farms in 2025. Retail data I've been tracking shows consistent year-over-year increases of 3 to 5% on standard 28-ounce cans across multiple major retailers. That doesn't sound dramatic in isolation, but analysts following the processed tomato market are projecting those increases to accelerate to 8 to 12% by August of this year. My recommendation is a full case, 24 cans, bought before the end of May. A cool, dark pantry shelf or basement closet is all you need. They'll keep for 2 to 3 years with no quality loss. This isn't hoarding. This is buying what you already use, just with a smarter time horizon. You don't want to be standing in front of a shelf in August paying 40 cents more per can and wishing you'd acted in May. Item number 2. Dry pasta. Pasta has been the universal symbol of affordable cooking for decades. It's the thing broke college students eat. It's the thing parents make when they need something fast and cheap. That association runs deep in how people think about pasta, and it's starting to work against them. Wheat prices have been volatile globally for the past 2+ years. A significant portion of that volatility traces back to disruptions in the Black Sea region, a major wheat-producing corridor that experienced repeated disruptions from 2022 onward. Those disruptions worked their way through commodity markets and eventually into the flour and pasta supply chain. Here's what most consumers missed. Major pasta brands have been absorbing some of those cost increases rather than passing them all through immediately. They've been doing something the industry calls price normalization, small increases, spaced out, calibrated to test how much consumers will tolerate before switching to store brands. And here's the follow-up to that. Store brands are now following right behind them with their own quiet adjustments. The price on 1-pound boxes of standard spaghetti and penne has climbed roughly 18% from the 2023 baseline. That looks small per box. But if you're cooking pasta once or twice a week as most families do, that compounds into real money over the course of a year. Dry pasta has an essentially indefinite shelf life when stored properly. I vacuum seal mine in large mylar bags or heavy-duty zip bags with the air pressed out. Store it in a bin, label it, rotate it. Buy 20 pounds now in a variety of shapes. It doesn't spoil. It doesn't expire. It just sits there waiting to save you money. Normal prices for pasta are not going to last. Buy while normal still exists. Item number 3. Cooking oils. This category has been quietly chaotic for 2 years and most shoppers haven't connected the dots. Let me explain the mechanism because it matters. Olive oil got very expensive. Spain, Italy, and Greece, the 3 dominant producers that supply most of the world's olive oil, all experienced severe harvest failures in 2023 and 2024. Production dropped dramatically. Prices responded accordingly. Olive oil went from a premium item to a genuinely expensive one. So consumers shifted. They moved to canola oil, vegetable oil, sunflower oil. And that increased demand hit those categories at exactly the wrong time. Sunflower oil was already under pressure because Ukraine, the world's largest sunflower oil exporter, had experienced significant production. Canola oil faced its own challenges. And here's the piece nobody's talking about. Canola oil imports from Canada. Tariff environment. This is the substitution trap. You move from an expensive oil to a cheaper alternative. But because everyone moves at once, the cheaper alternative gets more expensive too. And then tariff pressure adds a third layer on top. Retail pricing on cooking oils across the category is sitting at elevated levels with no meaningful relief expected before late 2026. Oils do go rancid, so don't overbuy beyond a 1-year supply, but 1 or 2 large containers bought now before summer pricing hits is genuinely smart. Store them away from heat and light. A cool pantry shelf or cabinet not next to the stove. Item number 4. Canned fish and seafood. Let me give you the protein math first, because it's important. A standard can of tuna, when you can still find a real 5 or 6 ounce can, provides roughly 25 to 30 grams of complete protein. At current prices, that's running about $1.5 to $2 per can. Ground beef at current prices delivers the same protein content for somewhere around $3.5 to $4 worth of product. Canned seafood is still, mathematically, one of the most efficient protein sources in the grocery store. But that equation is changing faster than the sticker price alone suggests. And this is where I want to introduce something I think every shopper should know. It's called the shrinkflation calculation. Most people look at a can of tuna, see it costs $1.59, and compare that to what it cost last year. But the can isn't the same can. The standard albacore tuna can has shrunk from 6 ounces to 5 ounces on multiple major brands over the past 2 years. Same label. When you calculate price per ounce now versus price per ounce then, the effective increase is running about 30%, not the 8 to 10% the sticker price implies. I want you to use this formula at the store. Divide the price by the net weight in ounces. Compare it to what you were paying per ounce before. That's the real price change. And for canned fish, that real number is much higher than it looks. Stock a variety. Tuna for sandwiches and salads. Salmon for patties and pasta. Sardines, if your family will eat them, they're nutritionally exceptional, extremely shelf-stable, and one of the best omega-3 sources in the pantry. Buy what you'll actually use. But buy it now because the value this category still offers is narrowing fast. Item number 5. Rice. Rice is the staple food for more people on Earth than any other single crop. Over 3 billion people depend on it as their primary caloric source. That global demand creates pricing dynamics that affect American consumers even though rice isn't our dominant staple. Here's what happened. In July 2023, India, the world's largest rice exporter, banned non-basmati white rice exports to protect domestic food security. Vietnam and Thailand, Both major exporters tightened their own quotas around the same period. The result was a meaningful contraction in global rice supply, hitting markets simultaneously. Prices spiked. Now here's the part that didn't make the news. Prices didn't come fully back down. Long grain white rice is up roughly 28% from its 2021 price baseline. A 20-pound bag that cost $10 to $12 in 2021 is now averaging $14 to $18 at major retailers. What happened is what behavioral economists call a baseline reset. The old price became history. The new price became normal. And with continued uncertainty in global export policy, there's no strong catalyst for a meaningful pullback in 2026. This matters because of how your brain processes prices, and I'll come back to that in more detail in a moment, because it affects every item on this list. For now, 20-pound bags of rice are still widely available and still represent good value bought in bulk. Store in food-grade airtight containers. 5-gallon buckets with gamma seal lids work perfectly. Add oxygen absorbers if you're storing long-term. White rice stored this way will last essentially indefinitely. Get 2 or 3 large bags now. It's not dramatic. It's just smart. Item number 6. Butter. Butter has become a luxury product in slow motion, and I think most households haven't fully registered the shift yet. The price on a standard pound of butter has climbed significantly over the past 2 years, and this isn't an isolated brand issue or a single retailer's pricing decision. It's a category-wide structural change driven by dairy economics that compound on each other. Feed costs went up. Milk prices went up. Processing costs went up. And butter absorbed a disproportionate share of those increases because of how it's priced at the commodity level. Here's the thing about dairy pricing that most people don't know. Butter is essentially the residual fat product after other higher-value dairy components: protein, cheese, skim milk. When milk prices rise, butter production costs rise, but butter can't easily absorb those costs through premiumization. It's a commodity product with commodity pricing, and commodity pricing, when it goes up, tends to stay up for a long time before any meaningful correction flows back to the shelf. If you have freezer space, butter is one of the highest value items you can stockpile right now. It freezes perfectly for up to 12 months. Keep it in the original wrapper plus a sealed freezer bag. Buy at warehouse clubs, Costco, Sam's Club, where the per-pound pricing is typically the most competitive. Buy more than you think you need. When prices look even worse in 6 months, which the data suggests they will, you'll be glad you did. Item number 7. All-purpose flour. Flour is invisible. I mean that in a specific way. It's in almost everything. Bread, muffins, pancakes, gravies, sauces, coatings for proteins, every baked good you make or buy, but because you don't reach for it every day the way you reach for oil or butter, its price changes tend to go unnoticed longer than almost any other staple. And right now, there is a significant price story building in flour that almost nobody in the consumer space is covering. Here's the mechanism. Flour prices don't move in lockstep with wheat commodity prices. They lag behind by 4 to 6 months, because flour mills buy wheat through forward contracts, prearranged purchases at prices set months in advance. Those forward contracts are the buffer between commodity volatility and what you pay at the shelf. But those contracts expire. And when they do, the mills reprice based on whatever the current wheat market looks like. Hard red winter wheat futures are up roughly 23% from their 2023 lows as of early 2026. The mills that locked in lower prices in 2023 and 2024 are now rolling those contracts forward into a much more expensive market. The result is that all-purpose flour at major retailers is running roughly 15% higher year over year, and that increase is likely to accelerate through Q3 and Q4 of 2026 as older contracts expire and new pricing hits the shelves. Here's the part that really matters. Flour price increases don't just affect the bag of flour you buy. They affect virtually every baked good, every processed food, every restaurant menu item that includes a wheat-based ingredient. It's an invisible increase that compounds across your entire food spending. Buy 25-pound bags from restaurant supply stores, Costco, or big box retail. Store in a 5-gallon food-grade bucket with a gamma seal lid and an oxygen absorber. Stored this way, All-purpose flour will keep for 5 to 10 years. That is not an exaggeration. This is one of the best storage values in the entire grocery store. Item number 8. Sugar. This one might surprise you more than any item so far. Because most people assume sugar is simple. It grows in tropical climates. It's refined. It's packaged. It's cheap. The reality is considerably more complicated. The global sugar supply has experienced 3 consecutive difficult production years. Brazil, the world's largest sugar producer by a significant margin, faced drought conditions during critical growing periods in both 2023 and 2024. India, the world's second largest producer and a major exporter, has maintained export restrictions. U.S. retail sugar prices are up roughly 19% from the 2022 baseline. But here's the mechanism behind that number that almost no consumer-facing content ever explains. Sugar and ethanol are in direct competition. When oil prices rise, Brazil's sugarcane producers make more money converting cane to ethanol, so they do. This reduces global sugar supply, which pushes sugar prices up, which has nothing to do with baking demand, nothing to do with weather, and everything to do with oil markets that are completely separate from your grocery list. You are, in a real sense, competing with the global energy market every time you buy a bag of sugar. That's an information asymmetry. Now you know the mechanism. And the practical implication is simple: white granulated sugar stores indefinitely. It doesn't expire. It doesn't spoil. It may clump, but clumped sugar dissolves perfectly normally. Store it in sealed airtight containers, food-grade plastic bins, mylar bags, or even original packaging in a dry space, and it will be just as usable in 5 years as it is today. Stock up now. The tariff environment is adding a third pressure layer on top of weather and ethanol competition. More on that in a moment. Before we get to item 9, I need to talk about something that connects multiple items on this list, and that almost no other channel covering grocery prices is addressing directly. Every item we've discussed so far has a supply story. Crop failures, export restrictions, weather events. These are slow-moving pressures that take months or years to fully flow through to the shelf. But there's a second layer of pressure sitting on top of all of it in 2025 and 2026. And that layer moves fast. Tariffs. The current U.S. trade environment has introduced or elevated tariffs on a significant range of imported goods, including agricultural products from Canada, Mexico, and several Asian exporters. Now, not every item on this list is directly tariff exposed, but several of them are. And the combination of supply disruption plus tariff pressure is what makes the price outlook for 2026 different from a typical year. When a commodity faces a bad harvest, prices rise and then gradually correct as production recovers. When tariffs are layered on top of that, the correction is delayed or partially blocked because the tariff cost doesn't go away when the harvest improves. This affects the cooking oils we discussed. It affects canola from Canada. It affects certain canned goods with imported components. It affects the oats and peanut products coming up on this list. You're not just dealing with weather and supply. You're dealing with trade policy. And trade policy, once implemented, tends to stay implemented for years. That's the context. Now let's keep going. Item number 9. Canned beans. I want to make an argument here that I think changes how you think about your pantry. Canned beans might be the single most undervalued item in the American grocery store. They're overlooked because they've always been cheap and abundant. They don't have the glamour of specialty health foods or the urgency of proteins like meat and eggs. But when you look at what a can of beans actually delivers, protein, fiber, complex carbohydrates, micronutrients, and a shelf life of 3 to 5 years, the value proposition is extraordinary. Canned beans have already climbed roughly 24% from their 2021 baseline. A 15-ounce can of black beans that cost 79 to 99 cents in 2020 is now averaging $1.2 to $1 at major retailers. That's a real increase, and the trend is pointing upward as legume supply faces its own weather-related pressures. Major growing regions in Argentina, Canada, and Myanmar have all experienced production disruptions in recent growing cycles. But here's the concept I want to give you that goes beyond just beans are getting more expensive. Think about your household protein sources, the way a financial advisor thinks about an investment portfolio. You don't want to be concentrated in one asset that can spike. You want diversification across multiple protein sources, canned fish, canned beans, eggs, dairy, and meat, so that when any single category has a bad price year, canned beans are your lowest volatility protein source. They're the bond in your food portfolio. They're not exciting. They're stable, they're dense, they last for years, and they're about to become more expensive while still being cheaper than everything else. Stock a variety. Black beans, kidney beans, chickpeas, navy beans, pinto beans. Dried beans go even further, lower cost per serving, longer shelf life, but require more prep. Buy both. Buy them now. Item number 10. Spices and seasonings. Nobody panic buys cumin. Maybe they should think about it. Spices are one of the most globally sourced items in your grocery cart. Black pepper comes primarily from Vietnam and India. Cinnamon from Sri Lanka and Indonesia. Cumin from India and the Middle East. Paprika from Spain, Hungary, and Peru. Each of these origin regions has experienced some combination of drought, flooding, political instability, or export complications over the past 2 years. The result is a global spice market that has gotten quietly expensive in a way that most shoppers haven't consciously registered. Premium black pepper is up roughly 35% from its 2022 baseline. Ground cinnamon is up about 28%. These aren't items that make financial headlines, but they add up fast when you're restocking a spice cabinet. Here's the cost per use math that makes this one of the highest return purchases on this list. A $5 jar of smoked paprika contains roughly 200 individual uses at about 2.5 cents per use. At $7, which is where premium smoked paprika is heading, that's still only 3.5 cents per use. The math is extraordinary. Spices are cheap at almost any price, but they're cheapest right now. The shelf life is excellent. Whole spices keep their potency for 3 to 5 years in sealed dark jars kept away from heat and light. Ground spices are usable for 1 to 2 years and perfectly functional beyond that with a bit of flavor degradation. A complete spice cabinet restock. Cumin, smoked paprika, garlic powder, onion powder, cayenne, cinnamon, Italian seasoning, ground ginger, black pepper, turmeric costs roughly $40 to $50 today. Based on current price trajectories, that same cart would run $60 to $70 by late summer. Buy your spices now, in full jars. This is one of the clearest wins on the list. Item number 11. Frozen vegetables. This is the item I mentioned in the opening, the one facing a double hit. Let me explain exactly what's happening. Frozen vegetables are by almost every nutritional measure equivalent or superior to the fresh produce that's been sitting in a distribution chain. Freezing happens close to harvest, at peak nutrient density. That's a fact that surprises a lot of people and that the fresh produce industry has no interest in publicizing. They're also still reasonably priced. For now. Here's what's happening behind the scenes. The major brands that dominate the frozen vegetable category have been absorbing significant cost increases, energy costs for freezing facilities, packaging cost increases, and the underlying raw vegetable price volatility from weather disruptions in California's Salinas Valley and the growing regions in Florida and Georgia. They've been holding prices to maintain market share. That strategy has a limit, and according to people who follow this category, the repricing is expected to hit in the second half of 2026. Now add the tariff dimension. Several frozen vegetable products, edamame being a notable example, have significant import components from Asian growing regions that are now facing new trade friction. That's the double hit. Supply cost pressure plus trade policy pressure, arriving at the same moment. If your freezer has available space, now is the time to use it. Large bags of peas, corn, broccoli, spinach, edamame, and mixed vegetables from Costco or Walmart give you the best per ounce value and let you lock in current pricing. Stack your freezer using FIFO rotation, first in, first out, so the oldest bags get used first. You're building 6 months of vegetable security at prices that are about to become the cheaper option. This is about eating well on a budget. Frozen vegetables make that possible. Stock them now. Item number 12. Peanut butter. This one has been hiding in plain sight. Peanut butter is one of the most calorically efficient, protein-dense, shelf-stable foods in existence. A 2-tablespoon serving delivers roughly 190 calories, 7 grams of protein, and healthy monounsaturated fat at a current cost of somewhere between 18 and 22 cents per serving. I've done the math across the entire grocery store. Nothing matches that ratio. Not canned tuna, not eggs at current prices, not Greek yogurt, not cheese. Peanut butter is the caloric and protein efficiency champion of the American pantry. And it's been getting more expensive quietly while everyone was watching beef and eggs. U.S. peanut production is concentrated in Georgia, Texas, Virginia, and Alabama, all of which experience significant drought stress in portions of the 2024 growing season. Peanut oil demand is also competing globally with peanut food use, which tightens the overall supply picture. The result is that major brand 18-ounce jars are up roughly 22% from 2021. The increases have been partially masked by house brand competition, keeping national brands competitive, but that equilibrium is breaking as input costs rise across the board. Commercially produced peanut butter, the stabilized kind, not natural, has a shelf life of 1 to 2 years at room temperature unopened. It freezes well too. If you go through a jar every 2 to 3 weeks, as many households do, buying 8 to 12 jars now creates a meaningful buffer at today's prices. The next video tease I have for you involves something in a completely different category, but first, let me show you 3 more items I prioritized personally. 2 of them you'd probably not think to stock up on. One of them you'll be very glad you know about. Item number 13. Oats. Oats are the breakfast budget anchor. A 42-ounce container of rolled oats gives you roughly 30 servings at about 15 cents each at current pricing. That extraordinary value is under a specific kind of pressure that makes this one of the most tariff-exposed items on this entire list. Canada is the world's largest oat exporter. The prairie provinces of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba produce the majority of oats imported into the United States. In 2024, those provinces experienced drought conditions that reduced oat yields significantly. Canadian oat export volumes are down roughly 18%. That's the weather half of the story. Here's the tariff half. Canadian agricultural imports, including grains, are operating in a new trade friction environment in 2025 and 2026. The combination of reduced supply and increased import cost is applying simultaneous pressure to the retail price of oats in a way that a weather event alone wouldn't create. U.S. retail oat prices are up roughly 14% year over year. That looks modest. But it's accelerating, and the structural conditions driving it, Canadian yield pressure plus trade friction, rolled oats store 1 to 2 years in original packaging. Transferred to sealed food-grade containers with oxygen absorbers, 5 years or more. Buy the largest format available. Store it properly. The 15-cent breakfast is still available today. Buy enough to protect that price for the next year or two. Item number 14. Honey. Archaeologists found edible honey in Egyptian tombs dating back 3,000 years. 3,000 years. I want you to hold that number in mind because it fundamentally changes the logic of buying this item. Every other item on this list has a shelf life, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years with good storage. Honey has no shelf life. It does not expire. Ever. If stored in a sealed container away from moisture, honey remains fully usable indefinitely. That means buying honey now at today's prices carries exactly 0 risk of waste. There is no scenario where you buy too much honey. Now here's the price story. U.S. and retail honey prices are up roughly 28% from the 2020 baseline, and the pressure is continuing from multiple directions. Colony collapse disorder and varroa mite infestations have been reducing domestic bee colony health for over a decade. Major honey exporting countries, Argentina, Brazil, and Ukraine, have all faced production and logistics challenges in recent years. And domestic premium honey is facing additional demand pressure as consumers increasingly distrust imported honey products due to documented adulteration issues. The tariff dimension is relevant here too. Chinese honey imports, historically a significant source of lower-priced honey in the U.S. market, are facing elevated tariff exposure under the current trade environment. that removes a pricing floor that kept domestic honey prices from rising further. Without that competitive pressure from imports, domestic honey producers face less incentive. Buy raw, unfiltered domestic honey in the largest format you can find. 5-pound containers give you the best per ounce value. If honey crystallizes in the jar, that's not a spoilage sign. It's a natural process. Just place the jar in warm water and it liquefies perfectly. Honey is a sweetener, a natural preservative, and a medicinal agent with well-documented antibacterial properties. Its versatility across uses makes it worth stocking in genuine quantity. It literally never expires. Buy more than you think you need. There is no downside. Item number 15. Coffee. I saved this one for last because I think it has the most alarming price story I've found in 6 months of research. And I want to make sure I explain the mechanism fully, because the mechanism is what makes this one urgent, in a way the others aren't. Over 70% of American adults drink coffee daily. It's not a discretionary purchase for most people, it's infrastructure the same way electricity or internet is infrastructure. Which is why a 25 to 40% price increase on packaged retail coffee, which is what multiple commodity analysts are projecting for the second half of 2026, would be one of the most directly felt budget events in recent memory. Here's what happened. Brazil, which produces more coffee than any other country on Earth, experienced back-to-back growing seasons damaged by drought and then frost at critical periods in the plant's development cycle from 2023 to 2025. Vietnam, the world's largest producer of Robusta coffee, also saw significant yield reductions. The result is that global green coffee inventories are at historically low levels, and the commodity price for Arabica beans roughly doubled from 2023 to early 2026. That is not a rounding error. That is one of the most dramatic commodity price events in the coffee market in decades. Now here's the mechanism that most people don't understand, the roaster buffer. When green bean prices spike, roasters and major retailers don't immediately pass that increase to you. They have forward purchase contracts. They have warehoused inventory bought at older, lower prices. They use these strategically to avoid sticker shock at the shelf, because sticker shock triggers brand switching, and brand switching is a nightmare for market share. So they absorb costs. They hold prices. They manage the transition. But here's the thing about that buffer. It has a limited size. You can only warehouse so much inventory. Forward contracts expire. And when a roaster's entire buffer of cheaper beans is exhausted, when every pound of old contract, pre-spike coffee has been used, they have no choice but to buy at current commodity prices and price the product accordingly. That moment is approaching. Commodity analysts tracking the coffee supply chain have been pointing to the second half of 2026 as the window when the buffer expires for the major players and retail prices adjust sharply. The estimates I've seen range from 25 to 40% increases on packaged ground and whole bean coffee. Here is exactly what I recommend. Buy whole beans. They preserve flavor significantly longer than pre-ground because the surface area that oxidizes is vastly lower. Buy from Costco or a warehouse club for the best per pound pricing. Portion them into quantities you'll use in 1 month. Vacuum seal each portion. Freeze them. Properly sealed whole beans in the freezer maintain their quality for 6 to 12 months with minimal degradation. If you drink coffee every morning and you have freezer space, this single purchase could save your household $200 to $400 over the course of 2026, depending on your consumption. That is a real number. That is money that stays in your pocket because you acted in May instead of waiting until August. You will not regret buying coffee now. I promise you that. And here's the pattern that ties all 15 items together. We are in a period of converging pressures that is genuinely unusual. Not unprecedented, food supply disruptions happen in cycles throughout history, but unusual in the specific combination of forces hitting simultaneously. Climate stress on critical growing regions. Global supply chain concentration with very limited redundancy. Energy and labor cost increases embedded into every step of the food processing chain. And now a significant tariff environment layered on top of all of it, creating a second wave of cost pressure that moves faster than the slow agricultural cycles. The retailers know this. The manufacturers know this. The commodity traders know this. They have been managing this reality for 12 to 18 months, trying to smooth the transition to higher prices. That smoothing is running out of runway. Here's something I mentioned earlier that I want to come back to, because I think it's the most important psychological frame in this entire video. Your brain has a feature, not a bug, that takes whatever price you've paid for something 3 or 4 times in a row and converts that price into normal. This is called price anchoring. It's how grocery stores price things. It's how behavioral economists explain why consumers stop complaining about increases within 6 to 9 months of them hitting. Within a year, $6 butter is just what butter costs. $5 coffee is just what coffee costs. The memory of $4 butter and 3. The window where you can act, the window where you still feel the gap between old prices and new prices as a loss rather than as baseline, is actually the window to do something about it. That window is right now, May 2026, before June 1st. You don't need a bunker. You don't need a year's worth of emergency rations. You need one extra shopping trip or a few extra items added to your regular shopping routine over the next 2 to 3 weeks. That's it. The goal isn't extreme preparation. The goal is looking back in December and realizing your grocery bill didn't spike as hard as everyone else's because you made a few smart specific moves in May. The people who acted in 2022 before the baby formula crisis, before the egg shortage, before the coffee spike, they didn't do it by hoarding. They did it by paying attention earlier than the average person. That's all this is. Earlier attention. Smarter timing. That's what you have now. If this video gave you something genuinely useful, not just interesting, but actually actionable this week, it takes 1 second. It costs you nothing. And it helps this content reach people who need it, but haven't found this channel yet. Subscribe if you're new. I put out this kind of research every week. Practical, specific, based on real data and real market tracking. Not doom content. The information you need to make smart decisions for your household. And here's what I want from you in the comments. How many of these 15 items are already somewhere in your pantry or freezer? Don't tell me the story. Just drop the number. One number in the comments. I read every single one and I want to see how prepared this audience already is. One more thing before you go. Next week I am covering something I have not seen a single other channel address. There are 3 household product categories, cleaning supplies, personal care, and paper goods, that are about to face a simultaneous price jump driven by a packaging supply chain issue that started 18 months ago in Southeast Asia and is only now hitting the retail shelf. If you run a household and you buy these products every month, and you do, you need to see it. I'll see you then. Take care of yourselves. Be smart out there.